What if I told you that with one simple design change, we could fix the entire story of the original 4 Saints Row games? With just one. What if I told you that with one simple storytelling mistake, they managed to ruin the entire 4 games as a whole, and in fact, if they changed this, they could have made every single entry to the series amazing and make sense and have their place in the story? What if I told you that Saints Row 3 and 4 could have made perfect sense and actually been the perfect follow-ups to Saints Row 1 and 2? I know that sounds crazy, but one mistake slash one design choice changed everything, and today I'm basically going to explain how Saints Row could have been absolutely amazing had they made one change. But basically, we're fixing Saints Row in one single decision today. I hope you enjoy. Now we're going to split this up into segments. I'm going to cover Saints Row 1 and 2 as a batch, as there's not too much to say on that. Then I'm going to talk about Saints Row 3 and the decision we would have to make to fix the Saints Row story. And then we're going to talk about the Saints Row 4 we got versus the hypothetical Saints Row 4 we could have got if that design choice would have been made. So, let's get straight into it. So let's start off with Saints Row 1 and 2. I want to briefly just explain why they work so well alongside each other. So, Saints Row 1, whilst being a really good self-contained story, is also a really good build-up to Saints Row 2. So the entire story basically goes as followed, really quickly summed up. You join a gang to try and clean up the row. You take orders to try and stop Stillwater being full of gang violence, and it does work, until basically Julius, the leader of the Saints, who you've been taking orders from, orders you to do something and he gets you blown up. Nice and simple. So in that moment, we basically learn, as the boss, that because we took orders and did what we did, it nearly got us killed and the Saints destroyed. Luckily, we don't die, we wake up in a coma in Saints Row 2. Now, in Saints Row 2, this is basically the follow-up of that. A complete tone shift, realistically, when you think about it. Sure, it's still gangster, but what you have to acknowledge is the tone shift in the boss themselves. They're not just following orders, they're not just doing what's right. They are pissed and they are revenge-seeking maniacs. And it works perfectly. Because of what happened in the first game, it built up into the second game being better as a follow-up and a self-contained story. In other words, one walked so the other could run. Now, I know that Saints Row 1 and 2 are very similar when it comes to quality, but I do think it's important to know that without Saints Row 1's amazing build-up, Saints Row 2 wouldn't have been as good as it was. It all just works together, and the way that those games released were perfect for the series. So what I'm saying here is that one game helps the other game immensely. Saints Row 1 is a great self-contained story. Saints Row 2 is a great self-contained story. Put them together and you've got one of the best stories told in gaming history, in my opinion. It's fantastic, and a massive tone shift is explained really well. So, let's talk a little bit about the ending of Saints Row 2. So basically, by the end of Saints Row 2, there's a few loose ends. We haven't killed Dex, we don't know much about Griffin, but we do own Ultor and basically have all the money we could imagine. So, it makes sense that when leading into Saints Row 3, we're these light-hearted celebrities that go easy and go with the flow. Now, I know that that's going to sound shocking, but I want you to hear me out, okay? At this point in the game, the boss had got revenge on all the major parties, besides maybe Dex and Griffin. But I could at least understand perhaps the boss going like, okay, you know what, fuck it, let's drop it, it's not that important, we've got our revenge, it's time to cool down and calm down, we are the Saints, we own Stillwater. And this leads the boss to being relaxed. Now, I know that because of the way Saints Row 3 and 4 played out, a lot of people view this as a bad thing, but what I'm going to explain here is how actually, this change wouldn't have been a bad thing if it had been followed up correctly. So, basically what I'm saying is the style of Saints Row 3 and the style of the boss in Saints Row 3 actually would have been somewhat okay. Again, it wouldn't have been perfect, but it would have been somewhat okay and makes sense if it was done right. So hear me out. So, years have passed, and we're now celebrities in Stillwater. We're basically going around like we own that shit, and we're doing a movie. You know how Saints Row 3 starts. Really light-hearted. Now, one thing we learnt about Saints Row 1 and 2, before we get too far into this, is that by taking it easy and just following orders, we got our crew killed, and ourselves nearly killed. Now, in Saints Row 2, he rectifies this by taking the reins, and going forward with it, and just doing everything. And then it kind of leads into Saints Row 3, where we're almost falling back into our old ways of being on the softer side. And now, whilst this is a different flaw, it still kind of shows a flaw that they could have overcome. So the same way that the flaw in Saints Row 1 was you taking orders and just doing what you were told and that nearly got you killed, the flaw in Saints Row 3 could have been that you went soft over time, and that should have been the evolution of the Saints there. That should have been the story the Saints had in Saints Row 3. Basically, that over time the crew got used to this really nice lifestyle, and they almost went soft. And what would that have ended in, I hear you ask? Johnny Gat and Shaun D dead. Now, I think that whilst that is quite a lot to take in, it makes sense. Again, go back to Saints Row 1. Because of the mistakes we made in that game, it led up to Saints Row 2 basically being us trying to rectify and learn from those mistakes. Then we go into Saints Row 3, making a ton of mistakes, and, you get where I'm going with this. The ending of Saints Row 3 is the biggest cop-out I can imagine. I hate that they went with the canon ending they did, because they honestly had it made for them. Picture this. Whilst, yes, in the whole of Saints Row 3, we kind of drop our grudges and go easy with it, it gets 2 of our crew members killed. By the end of Saints Row 3, though, there's 2 options, as we all know. There's the one where we save Shaun D, and there's the one where we let Shaun D die to get revenge. Now, the reason I get so upset with the ending they chose is because the ending they chose meant that Saints Row 3 meant nothing, and this is the choice that they messed up on. Saints Row 3 should have been a story about how the gang going soft led to them losing out. It should have been a tragedy. It should have been that the Saints went soft and it got them killed. And now the Saints are a broken mess of a crew with many lieutenants dead. That should have been the story told in Saints Row 3. But because they went with the ending where you save Shaun D instead of the ending where you kill Killbane, unfortunately, there is no evolution. You're just as soft. You basically do exactly what you were doing. You don't bother getting revenge, and you fall back into the ways you were at the start of Saints Row 3. You literally trade your dick in for a pussy, as Johnny Gat would put it. And I think that's a great way to put it. Unfortunately, with that ending of Saints Row 3, whilst it may be good for the fans of Shaun D and stuff, what have the Saints achieved? All that's happened is we lost Johnny Gat. That's the story. No revenge was taken on Killbane. Cyrus gets away with it. It's just awful. Quite frankly, by choosing that ending, the Saints choose to remain soft and have no evolution over the whole of Saints Row 3. Now picture this. Instead of going with that ending in Saints Row 3, they go with the other ending, where the boss goes, being soft got my crew killed. Whilst I have to sacrifice Shaun D, if I keep being soft, the Saints will never learn anything. The boss sacrifices Shaun D and puts revenge first. Killing Killbane, killing Cyrus, and basically just going out there and taking out everyone. By doing this, the Saints learn one thing. That they need to start being hard again. They need to start being these vengeful killers that people are scared of, because going soft has got their crew dead. Now, unfortunately, with the other ending of the game, there's no message to learn because they end up remaining soft. By the end of Saints Row 3, by saving Shaun D, they let their enemies just escape to remain soft. And once again, it leaves us with more loose ends that no one wants. However, with the other ending of Saints Row 3, it's perfect. Because, quite frankly, whilst the crew are dead, by the end of this, the boss learns the most powerful message he learns throughout the entire series. Being soft got his best friends killed. Now, whilst in Saints Row 1, the mistake was, I followed orders and nearly got myself killed, and ruined the Saints' legacy. It was rectified in Saints Row 2. So in Saints Row 2, the boss learns from that mistake, overcomes that mistake, and leads the gang like a real saint would. Now, this should have been what happened with Saints Row 3 and going into Saints Row 4. The ending of Saints Row 3 should have been the boss devastated and vengeful. The fact that Shaun D had to die, Johnny Gat had to die, Viola had to die. They're now seen as international terrorists because of the stunts that Stag pulled. It should have been where the boss is at his breaking point. The crew is demolished. He internally is heartbroken from losing all his friends. And quite frankly, he learns the most valuable lesson, which is he let his guard down and he got his loved ones killed. So Saints Row 4 should have really just gone with this approach of the Saints being destroyed, the Saints' name meaning nothing at this point because they're now branded as terrorists. Half the crew dead and the boss so vengeful and pissed off at everything that happened that he once again learns the most valuable lesson he needs to know. And that's that by going soft it got his crew killed. So he needs to tie up all the loose ends he has left. Boom, bringing us back full circle with Dex and Griffin. At the end of the day, the Saints' name means nothing. The Saints are gone. That legacy he had isn't there anymore. They're now literally branded as terrorists. So what's the one thing he has left to do? Like I say, settle the score. So this leads us into Saints Row 4, a very pissed off, vengeful boss trying to right the wrongs he made along the way and start the Saints anew. So what we could have had here, basically, is that a game about the boss not only starting a Saints afresh, trying to clear their name and explain everything, But on top of that, also, the Saints realizing that by letting too many people go and not killing people when we had the chance, all you've done is kill more people off. For example, it had been a valuable lesson for the boss to learn that in Saints Row 3, when he had the chance to kill Killbane, but didn't, that's what got Shaundy killed, because he had to choose between then, in that last moment, between taking down the enemy or letting him get away. Another thing he could have realized, for example, is not killing Cyrus when he had the chance. By going soft, basically, and not doing these things, it's the reason his crew is dead. And I feel like that would be the great message for Saints Row 4, and the great way of leading into Saints Row 4. Because now that the boss has learned this, he realizes that he's let too many things go along the way, and he won't be able to start the Saints afresh with a clean slate and actually mean something again, without tying up these loose ends. So Saints Row 4 would have been the boss's revenge run of tying up all the loose ends from the previous games, hunting down Dex, killing all the people that wronged him along the way, and then finally ending with the Saints starting fresh and anew with no more grudges along the way. Therefore, we would have new crew members to meet, but on top of that, the Dex saga would finally have been over, where the boss was at his most vengeful and heartbroken throughout the entire series. By simply choosing the other ending of Saints Row 3, where the boss learns a valuable lesson about acting soft in the long run gets his friends killed, he learns that he should go back to his original roots and really take down the people that wronged him, because the longer he leaves these loose ends there, the more people that are going to get killed along the way. He should take action when he can take action, instead of putting it off, going soft, and waiting for that to come back to bite him. And I think it would be very ironic if the game that brings Saints Row back, a Saints Row 4 that actually, fits the fans and basically makes Saints Row 3 make sense, was about going back to your roots. Wouldn't that be quite a nice tale? The Saints Row 4 that could have saved the series and actually made Saints Row 3, 2, and 1 all connect in a half-decent way. Again, it's not perfect. It's fan service here. This is coming from a fan's mind, not a writer. But the Saints Row 4 that could have connected all these games together and had the fourth game be an amazing entry to the series as well, where it's a revengeful boss, hurt from the loss of his friends, hunting down Dex, would have been a game about going back to your roots. And I think that, considering where Saints Row is right now, a game going back to their roots being the salvage for the series, it's quite ironic, isn't it? That's my take. This is a very weird video. I'm sorry if I kind of rambled. It's currently 2:54 in the morning. But I think that realistically, Saints Row, the original series, could have been amazing with just a few design tweaks. The main one being, by choosing the ending we did choose in Saints Row 3, the boss never learnt anything. There was no progression like there was with Saints Row 1 and 2. So to kind of basically tidy this up and put this into a bit of a conclusion here for people who may have got lost along the way, this is how it should have gone. Saints Row 1 was a game about following orders, doing what you were told, and it eventually leads you to getting you and your crew almost killed. This is rectified in Saints Row 2. In Saints Row 2, you're a revengeful, pissed-off maniac who doesn't let things fly, who doesn't just take orders, he takes the reins and rights his wrong. You learn from your mistake in the first game, and that makes the second game that much more impactful and badass, and just make more sense. And then cue Saints Row 3. We have our second mistake as the boss. We start to let things fly, we start to go soft. We start to not put revenge first and actually just let things drop. And that once again leads us to getting our crew killed. Now if they'd have gone with the other ending in Saints Row 3, Saints Row 4 could have led into the boss really trying to rectify these mistakes and right his wrongs. He goes through being revengeful, building the Saints anew, and taking out all the people that wronged him along the way that he let fly, basically learning the boss the most valuable message throughout the entire series, that he can't go soft, otherwise he gets the people he loved killed. By the end of Saints Row 4, we'd have a dead best friend and a dead crew member, but a Saint starting afresh with the right mindset, which ironically is to go back to your roots of Saints Row 2 and just understand that by letting things fly by and not taking control of things, you will let people die. And I feel like that would have just been a really good conclusion to the series, but hey, that's just me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you did enjoy this video. Sorry if it was kind of ranty and all over the place. I tried to construct it the best I could, but even I at times was starting to lose track of where I want it to go. But hopefully you like this concept, and yeah, see you soon.